Hi, Ujjwal.
Hi Ram, good evening.
Yeah, I just Magda is also not here, so I thought I might get Suresh. I don't think I have met you before. Are you? Do you have a corporate background? Hello. Hello.
Hey Ram, this is Suresh here.
Yeah, Suresh. I just wanted to know what is your background?
Ram, my background is from operations,
Okay,
and I'm just into coaching. Yeah.
Okay, but you are working with a company, right?
No, I am now out of corporate life, and I'm taking a full-time coaching.
Yeah, but you have a corporate background.
Yes, that's right.
Okay, fine, good. Ashok, you too have, right? Ashok, hello. Okay, because I just wanted to have a couple of people who have some corporate backgrounds, so to discuss, add more sense to some reality to what we are going to talk about today. Okay. Hi, welcome to this session of our, whatever we might want to call it, advanced webinar. It has gone through various names. Currently, we are addressing systemic coaching. Probably the third or the fourth session will go on for the rest of the year. But I put on something on the chat box. It's a couple of links to Johari's window, which is something that I'm going to cover in respect of systemic coaching, team coaching, which is not usually linked with. Hey, Venkat, I'm moving you up to the panel. Okay, Venkat. Names keep shifting, Okay. Can I share the links again? Don't you see it on top? Okay. Let me redo that. Okay, and I hope all of you can see that. Can you see it now on the chat box? Yeah, okay, great. So a couple of things before I start. For those of you who are in Bangalore who might be interested, 16th and 17th, Trace Hobson, who was here in this program some weeks ago, he's running his special program, which is more on, which is really aligned a lot more to operations, very relevant to practicing line managers, people who are familiar with agile coaching and so on. It could be well worth it. I think the mailer has gone to most of you. If you still require the mailer, do get in touch with me after the program. I'll have Magda or Trace send you the link. On the top of my head, I don't have it. I don't think I'll be able to access it immediately as well. So today, I want to do a couple of things, and we can co-create the context as we go along. And I have a few people here, Ujjwal, who's currently a MCC coach. Venkat, within the next month or 2 months, he will be an MCC coach. He's in the last legs of his MCC journey. Suresh and Ashok are both doing the programs in coaching at this point in time. Ashok is doing with one of our trainers, Priya, in I think Bangalore. Suresh, I'm not quite sure of what the background is, but the main reason why I wanted you all to come here is, first of all, there's nobody else. I was feeling quite lonely. I wanted some people around. Secondly, the fact is that systemic coaching is about corporate applications. I do know that all of you have some corporate background. Venkat is currently working as a COO level person in one of the major Tata companies. Others have been in corporates and who are now coaches. So let me start with a bit of a recap on what we may have covered in systemic coaching so far. And please, if you, whoever you want to add, and if any of you raise your hands up, you would like to join the panel, can contribute something, please feel free to do that. We can co-create the program as we're going along. To a large extent, I'm going to base whatever I'm going to say about on Peter Hawkins in terms of some of the stages of team intervention that he talks about, what he thinks, what he says are the 5 disciplines of systemic coaching, and so on and so forth. But before that, very often the question is asked, I'm going to be with a panel of 4 people, Pradeep Mukherjee, Yogesh Patkonkar, and Trey Hobson on the APAC conference on the 24th. Might see some of you if you're going to be there in the APAC conference at that time. We're going to have a freewheeling discussion. Each one of us may have a slightly different point of view in terms of how systemic coaching works. For instance, Trey's, rightly so, he says that you can coach an individual systemically. That's true. But from Peter Hawkins' kind of definition, it's slightly different. What he talks about is the sum, the parts, and the relationship between the sum and the parts. So if you're really working with individuals, you're working with the parts. And you might go into detailed internal exploration, resolving issues, and so on as far as the individual is concerned. Very often it's about the behavior. However, experience does show, those of us who have been corporate managers, who've been then coaches, and we have worked in both the spaces parallelly in some senses, and worked with individuals as well as systems, we find that however good a coach is, however big a transformation the coach is able to make to an individual, that individual coached and transformed, repackaged and reframed, when they go back into a space which perhaps is not as open and receptive as they have now become, usually help make some regress. Or in cases, many cases I know, they resign. They feel that they are not able to contribute anything more, they quit the organization. Both ways, what happens is the organization loses. So when I started working on it several years ago, that was what impelled me to move into an alternative approach. I hadn't heard anything about systemic coaching, so started practicing my own version of collecting people in groups and then forming teams and talking to them. And I found there was a tremendous amount of improvement that happened. And then I learned about systemic coaching. I met Peter Hawkins. He'll probably be starting a webinar later next year, all going well with us. And I understood more about what systemic coaching was. I'm still understanding. I'm purely on a learning stage. But parallelly, I devised my own systems to work with teams. And I found that it made a huge difference when people came together and they aligned themselves to the team which now formed. And I defined the difference between a group and a team. Group as something which doesn't have an emotional bond. Very often people say groups don't have a common goal, but that's not necessarily true. Groups can have a common goal. But groups become teams when they have an emotional bonding. They have a much better understanding. They have a much better relationship, much better awareness of each other. And then they form teams. They cover each other's back. And Google did a huge study, several $100 million, several years. The Project Aristotle, take a look at it. And in the Project Aristotle, they put down 5 conditions, which are not that different from those of you who are familiar with this subject, The Dysfunctions of a Team by Lencioni. He talks about the 5 dysfunctions. Here they talk about the 5 functions. The chief amongst them is psychological safety. The teams should feel safe. Members should feel safe. They should feel that they are not being judged, that they are not being resisted. They can be open. They can trust one another, which in turn builds interdependability. They watch each other's back. These are the 2 major behavioral changes that happen when groups become teams, make effective teams. And then there are 3 more conditions which are all goal related, that there's a large meta goal, which is over and above whatever other performance goals that the company wants to set or the team wants to set. There's clarity about those goals, very clear communication, as well as there's a structure which supports those goals. These 5 factors, Project Aristotle also talked about in a book called The Culture Code. They are still very, very good starting points for any kind of systemic work. But if you really go back to the definition of Peter Hawkins about the relationship, what is extremely important is to establish that relationship at each level. In one sense, at the individual level, interpersonally, the relationship of that individual with one's own purpose and meaning. So it's almost like a deeper self-discovery, exploration, etc., as it would happen in individual coaching. And then between that person and other team members, and then between each team member as a space, as a relationship, as an awareness, and then from there into the organization, the larger organization. And then perhaps beyond that into the larger system of stakeholders. It could be vendors, it could be customers, it could be the local government, multiple things. So Peter Hawkins talks about these kind of stages where he talks about at one level, people being treated as individual. At a second level, the team itself as a set of individuals. And then moving beyond that into those individuals plus the team as an entity separately. That means if you have 8 people who are members of a team, there is a 9th entity, the gorilla, unseen gorilla, which is in the room as a 9th member. And then you have the team, the individuals, and then the system. And the system can be a subsystem of a large company. It could be the company. And then there's a larger ecosystem, which is much bigger than that. So these are the multiple levels at which these operate. I'm just setting the basic understanding of what we are talking about as a system, because each person and discussant will have his or her own definition of what systemic coaching is, just to get a common understanding that this is what we are going to talk about. I'm sure if you have another understanding, that's perfectly fine. We'll talk about it. But what I know about is this, and therefore, any contribution that I might be able to make is on the basis of this. And then Peter Hawkins talks about several stages of how the coaching aspect of it works. At the first level, it's a facilitation, which is mostly about the tasks which happen at a particular point in time. Then it could be about performance, which is a task plus the process. Then it's about a bit of leadership, which involves stakeholders. Then it could be about a change, a transformation from one culture to another. And then finally about a much larger system in terms of systemic coaching. These are the different stages at which systemic coaching can happen. And he talks about 5 disciplines. First, he talks about something called connecting, which is about establishing a contract, an agreement, a relationship between the various elements of the team, the individuals, the team, the stakeholders, and beyond. And there is co-creation, which is about building the team together, melding the team together with an emotional context. Then clarifying, which is about probably developing a relationship, a vision, a set of goals, and so on. And commissioning, which is then moving into putting that action into play and anchoring it over a period of time with what he calls as core learning. All these you will find if you just go on Google, systemic coaching, systemic team leadership coaching by Peter Hawkins. There are several PPTs, and there is also a website in which all this information is easily available. So I'm not going to go into too much of detail about these. But at this point in time, if there are any questions, any of you, either from the panel or from the attendees, please. And also, Rekha Upadhyay, she would like to be promoted to the... Okay, so what I would like to briefly do is each one of you, briefly, operative word, I would like you bring about your own experience in terms of systemic coaching or any aspect of systemic coaching as I have described now, which is a little more than just individual coaching. It doesn't have to be coaching in a coaching sense, because some of you are still probably learning to be coaches. That's fine. But as you work there as managers and so on, what is it that you experienced? And what difference would it have made had there been an element of the systemic approach to the interventions that your organizations did. So I would just like to take this panel through these questions, and then after that, we'll go into a deeper discussion.
Ram, Rekha here. I had raised my hand more to ask a query.
Sure.
I'm sorry
That's
if
okay.
that was to be not added as panelist. So what I had a question was, if we are looking at a group or a team coaching in an organization, where organization in itself is a system for that matter, but do we really approach it with, how do we really arrive at what are the goals, as this team which is going to have? Do we really follow an assessment methodology to arrive at that, or how do we really arrive at the starting point of it?
Okay, it's more than one question, Rekha. So it's okay. So you're on the panel. That's no. The point. Let's start with this. Take a real case, one that you are experiencing or have experienced. What would be the pain point of the organization?
In terms of the pain point from an organization, for example, I've been seeing startups where they've never had any training and development in the organizations, right? They know their own challenges. They know with diagnosis, we can really see an organization diagnosis that what's really happening in the organization. But in case of where they don't have competencies, framework in place, or nothing which is there in place, how do we really approach, those scenarios?
Just a second. You are an HR person, are you?
Yes.
So you are approaching it from a very narrow lens of an HR person in L&D, right?
I'm not an L&D person. I've been in talent management, but broadly, if we look at some of these startups which are, say, a 50-member or a 100-member organization, just existed in the market for the last 5-6 years. They're not very long existing.
Leaving all that out.
Yeah.
Bringing it to a specific context. How is all this affecting the organization in some way from its goals? What happened? What's happening?
Where I sometimes really analyze some of the...
Sorry, I know I don't want your analysis. I'm sorry. Because of the time, I'm sorry to be rude. But what, in one word, in one sentence, what is it that the organization is suffering from?
Trust and collaboration.
Okay. And how does the trust and collaboration, the absence thereof, manifest itself in the organization?
People are not working with each other. Teams are not working with each other. They don't even want to see an eye and eye with each other.
So, but within the teams, are they working with each other? You said teams are not working with each other.
There is misalignment.
Okay. So within the team, people are not working with each other.
Yeah.
And teams are not working with each other. That means there is a silo effect.
Yes.
Right. So if there are silos, the whole issue is nobody has the organization in mind. Each one has a very limited perspective of what they would wish to achieve. It is what I call in a board meeting, everybody is sweet, hug each other maybe. As they go out, then after that, it's the night of the long knives. They are at war with each other. I mean, this is not just one company. Every single company that I see is exactly that, because of the silos. That is because of the way the corporation's objectives are today formed.
Okay.
Very large organizations, multi-billion-dollar organizations, they work in silos where they promote wittingly or unwittingly a relationship between those divisions. They call them business units, PLN units, whatever they want to call it. And they would rather go to an outsider to source something even that was available within the business. That is to the extent to which silos are formed.
Okay.
So the only way to get over this is starting at the very top. It doesn't work. So happily, what would happen is the CEO believes, of course, CEO doesn't need any coaching because they are all beyond coaching. And the CXOs have the same kind of attitude. We don't require coaching. Somebody else below require coaching. Or if we require coaching in many organizations, and they have asked me at the CEO level, we would like 4 or 5 of your people to be coached. And I tell them, it will be much cheaper if you give all 5 or 6 of them to me and I coach them together, I'm going to charge per hour. So it'll be 1/5 or 1/6 of the cost. No. They wouldn't like to be coached together. My question to the CEO and the CHRO is, if people who work together do not wish to be coached together, how can they ever work together? So
Sure.
fundamentally, it's a leadership issue that the CEO of the company or the board of the company does not even have the courage and the guts to be able to face those whom they have appointed as leaders to say, you work together or else. And the process of making them working together in terms of leadership as a team is what would be systemic, where the work would be done both at the individual level as well as at a group level in terms of how you make them into a team.
Okay.
So what you refer to as an assessment, yes, we will talk about the second half of today's session. Hopefully we would go into that.
Sure.
Would be you start with an initial cultural overview assessment. How do the leaders view each other? How do they view the company? Maybe a larger number of people how do they view the leaders as well as the company? And based on that, you could have a climate survey. And one of the best such surveys that I have known is made in India itself now. Many people use something called Barrett. And I have used EUM by ASHOK Malhotra, which is far superior to anything else that I have seen. I use it now as a routine everywhere. And with that, you would be able to figure out what are those things that could potentially be improved? How are these people behaving at this point in time? How are they looking at themselves? How are they looking at the organization? And based on that, you could arrive at what perhaps needs to be done if they are willing. Ultimately, they have to be willing. Sure. You cannot force them to do anything. So if a long answer to a question that you asked is, yes, there is a need for assessment. You could use EUM as a starting point. I use also, I'll talk about a little bit later, Johari's, which is known to practically every HR manager. That could be used in a team for both interpersonal and intrapersonal awareness. And then from there, you help them to form into a team rather than a group. And then from there, move into a co-creation of a vision and to collaborative action planning. So in a simple way, that is what would be systemic.
Sure.
There are several people who want to share their corporate experiences. We will do that. But before that, Ashok, Suresh, Venkat, and Ujjwal, if you would like to please share quickly. Rekha, if you have any other questions, please ask. Otherwise, I'll sort of...
No, thank you. Thank you for... Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Ram, Ashok here.
Yeah, Ashok, please.
So I would like to share my corporate experience in terms of what Rekha has just said. Yeah. Your explanation about the silo effect.
Yeah.
Different functions in an organization, and not all our organizations are aligned with each other, so they miss the larger corporate goal.
Yeah.
That leads to suboptimal performance.
Yeah.
So as you rightly said, you need to do a cultural assessment of what is happening. Very often you'll have hierarchical cultures. I have seen situations where the culture could be pretty toxic. On the surface, it may look to be something different from what it actually is. And this usually happens in organizations which have maybe 1 or 2 real decision makers. And from a coaching perspective, whether we would be in a position to identify individuals of this sort who would very much be even the sponsors. So how does one get across and then make sure that the sponsor is also aligned? Very often that could happen. In terms of certain workshops that I myself have carried out, Ichak Adizes, who is a management consultant, talked about the dominant aspect of any individual. So it's a personality trait that is dominant. So for instance, you could have a creative person who would be having an entrepreneurial spirit. Somebody who is guided by...
Ashok, sorry for interruption. Can you be brief? Just the essence of what you're trying to say.
Okay. No two individuals are alike. Individuals can be classified into various groups based on their dominant personalities, and their behavior would be guided by that. If we are able to find out what is the dominant trait, there is a possibility that we could work on it to bring about a greater alignment.
How would that help?
Greater alignment...
No. I'm talking about the dominant personality. If 80% of the organization turn out to be Trumps, so the dominant personality is Trump, how is that going to help?
In my experience, I have not seen that 80%, but I have definitely seen certain individuals who do not fit into the group.
No. My question is simply this. If we are going by a dominant personality, think about it.
Yeah.
If you're going by a dominant personality, you never know whether a dominant personality is good, bad, ugly, right, wrong. So why should it be a dominant personality?
No, a personality trait that is dominant in an individual. So for instance, if he is authoritative, it comes out in his behavior.
No, so therefore, we are now talking about a larger system. So I missed the connection. So
Right.
when you talk about dominant personality, then we are talking about a systemic change. An organization, what we start with now, I would like the rest of the panelists also to think about it this way. Pretty much, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. My experience with 80% of the organization I deal with, to some extent or other, barring the very, very few, they are all operating in silos. Most of the leaders of those individual silos, they are focused on their own self-aggrandizement. And like you started saying, very often these people do not know or do not care what the larger organizational goal is. And that's also because the way the reward systems are made within an organization. So in that kind of a space, the dominant personality of most of these people is very likely to be, from an MBTI perspective, let's say you take that, is going to be a STJ, E or I don't care. But by and large, they are going to be STJs. So the dominant personality of the organization reflected is also going to be an STJ.
Right.
And that is what is creating the silo. So that is what the problem is. So by making the dominant personality possibly the feature that you want to adopt, it's not going to solve the problem. I'm a bit confused. I'm asking you.
So one way to go forward is that we may have a perception of a dominant personality in an individual. What do others feel in terms of what is dominant in him will give a true picture on what others feel vis-a-vis his own feelings.
Sure, it would. But ultimately, we are looking at the total team. So each person will have to understand what each of the other persons, to that extent, it's okay. Okay, let's move around a little bit. Venkat, what is your own perspective, having run fairly large companies? What is your perspective? And you are a coach. You're going to be an MCC coach. So what's your perspective in terms of how would coaching work at the individual level and how would coaching work at a systemic level?
Thanks, Ram. Couple of things that one tends to observe is that clearly there is a lot of functional boundaries that gets created. Everybody wants to optimize within their function, and that actually comes in the way of optimizing the larger organization goal. That is one. The second thing is also, taking on what was said by the earlier speaker, is that one has also seen that when in any department, it does not need to be at a organizational level, even at a departmental level. If the head is a very, very dominating person and wants to have his or her own views, then one has seen that the team tends to kind of just agree to what that person says to be out of problem. and that actually comes in the way of collaboration, because they don't want to be caught on the wrong foot by the domineering person, and hence that actually creates a lot more siloism than partnering. I've seen leaders who have been pretty open in accepting divergent views. In such a condition, the team tends to work much more closely than when the leader is not more closely than when the leader is more dominant. The third thing that I would like to mention is that that many a times within organization, and we tend to look at trying to solve a few individuals aspects by coaching, by individual coaching. But what I am actually realizing more and more is that unless and of course we don't address the larger team members, because end of the day, by coaching one person, that person gets back into the same environment in which he or she is going to work. So unless and of course we don't address it in totality, the benefit of coaching the individual, while that person may improve and continue to remain improved, but the larger organization may not get the full benefit of it. So these are my 3 points.
Okay. So in your own environment, has there been, in the Tata companies, to be honest, I do know that TCS has a fairly massive systemic coaching initiative. Are you aware of it?
Yes, I am aware of it, and I do know Preeti Demello, who actually leads that.
Yeah. So, in fact, Preeti and I, we have worked together on certain projects. We have written a paper together. Initially, I was involved in parts of it. But of course, the unfortunate part of it is in TCS as of today. I wouldn't say unfortunate as yet. It's not really at the leadership level. It's more at the middle management and probably senior management level as well. Maybe it is reaching there. I don't know of too many organizations today. I worked with a few where it's the whole thing, like you are talking about the dominant personality and so on. Are we now talking about the CEO or people below the CEO?
I would actually look at it at multiple levels. Mm-hmm. One is obviously the CEO is an important person because that person leads the whole organization. But I would also look at it at a departmental level, because I've seen that even a functional head or even a location head, if that person is not
let me ask you this question, Venkat, very simply. Which is more dangerous? The CEO being a dominating person, autocratic, not allowing people to be open, divergent views, or at the functional level, somebody being of that nature?
No, obviously, the CEO has the highest impact on the organization.
Yeah. So this is what I want all of you to keep in mind, because very often, if there is such a person on top, and they want to change everybody else because they don't want to themselves change, it doesn't make any sense. So the people below, if the CEO is really not so much an STJ, not so much corporate, then you would have at least some hope for the rest of the organization being more open, more psychologically safe. And I think that is one of the things that most corporations today either do not want to address or take care of. So, yeah, briefly now, Suresh, Ujjwal, and Debi Prasad, if you could give your experiences, your insights into this issue.
Sure. Ram, if I can comment, thanks for promoting me to the panel. In my experience of systemic coaching, what I'm just supporting whatever you have said so far, that unless that systemic approach is not starting from the top in many of the hierarchy-driven organizations, it becomes really difficult to bring that much of effectiveness, because people at number 2, number 3, number 4 level, I have seen them more or less, they are willing to perhaps collaborate if they see a leadership role modeling or something similar happening at the top. Because if people at the top are fighting or they are working in a silo, then it is very difficult for the team to follow. That's what I have seen in Indian context so far. And I would like to recall theory U here, where Otto Scharmer talks about that there needs to be an open mind, open heart, and open will to be able to move from the current state to desired state. And I have seen in my own systemic coaching experience that the first thing that a coach perhaps can work on is to open the hearts. And for that to happen, increasing the connect or enabling the connect between them. And Johari window is very simple but very beautiful and profound tool. Thank you for bringing that up right in the beginning. I have used that simple tool to bring the connect. And once that anchoring starts happening, the heart starts opening up. And then there is mind, and then there is will, and all of that can be worked on. So
okay, Ujjwal, can you tell me, how have you used Johari in whatever team or systemic coaching that you have worked on?
Sure. In not only one, but in multiple approaches, I have used Johari window, something like this. What I do is that I first bring people in an environment which is where they are not neurologically anchored, so not in office, but maybe at a different place in a freewheeling kind of an environment. And then I have made a list of questions or list of prompts, that at least there are 15 to 20 prompts that I use people to share. So there are about 15, 16 prompts which they will share about themselves right from the beginning. As Malcolm Gladwell says, that you cannot really separate yourself from where you have come from. So right from the beginning, their names, their spouses' names, their children, what are their names, where are they studying, where are they from, their native place, some achievement from the childhood, something which they really missed. There are a number of prompts, including last vacation that they took, when and where, next vacation plan they have in mind. And of course, I seek their permission. If they are not comfortable to share anything of that sort, they can simply deflect that question. But most of them, and in last, people talk about one thing that keeps me happy is this about the team. One thing that ticks me off from the team is this about the organization. Entire, kind of an X-ray of the individual, which is shared. And I had seen some of the very defining moments where a person sitting next to each other, both are senior vice presidents, and this guy just knew that he was not there for 3 or 4 days, but he was not aware that his father was suffering from cancer last 4 years, and he just passed away. And this colleague of him couldn't even see the face of his father. He was cremated just before he reached there. So that kind of a situation. So the moment that happens, the silos. And in the last, I always make sure that I give them this prompt that, that one thing that you do not know about me, which I have not shared with you so far, is this. And then one line of feedback, impression, observation that you would like to give it to me. And with my open heart and open mind, I am ready to take whatever you wanted to tell me all these while, but you have not told me. So this simple exercise, brings the connect.
Okay. Ujjwal, thanks a lot. What you're saying is tremendously powerful.
Thank you.
It is in terms of sharing with people, one's, let's say, the deepest self, not holding anything back, which exhibits one's vulnerability, and then allows other people to respond to it. What it does is, you are right, in one sense, it opens up, just for those who may not be that familiar with the Johari's window, there are the 4 windows. The open window is where the individual knows obviously about themselves, but also other people know about them. So these come together as an open window. There are no secrets between what they know, what other people know about them. But there is a window which is called the hidden window, where the individual say, I do not want any of you to know certain things about myself, like the Dr. Jekyll kind of a stuff, and you are under the impression I'm this kind of a guy, while you can see who I am now, wearing these earphones and my pink t-shirt or whatever it is, older person and so on and so forth. But there are many things about me that you do not know, which is a hidden window. And there is a part of me which you, based on my behavior, you understand who I am, the way that I land on you, which I may not be aware. And that is the blind spot, the blind window, where the individual is not aware of what other people are thinking of them. And there's a fourth window, which neither of them know. So if you go through those links, the Johari is a very, very powerful, very simple thing to understand. So what Ujjwal is now saying is, which is a very non-traditional way of doing it, not the typical Johari approach, but with equally powerful, is where when a person shares openly about things which other people don't know about him, maybe his father died or something else happened, or this is the kind of person that my background is, very often I invite them, like just like Ujjwal said, what are your origins? Where do you come from? Very often a CEO or senior person who everybody thinks that he is a bit of a martinet, is an autocrat, he starts saying that, look, this is a childhood that I had, a deprived childhood perhaps. But everybody's impression about them shifts in many ways. They are being vulnerable if they wish to be. So there is a hidden window which is being opened up. At that point in time, if the facilitator is good, the facilitator allows other people to open up and feed this person back, share, without any opposition, in an appropriate way, in an appreciative way, not in a critical way. And then that person is able to see what so far he has not been able to see about himself. There have been people who have come to me and said, some of them may be in this room, were saying the other day, I didn't realize that people thought that I was a very caring person. And it came as a surprise. Nita is here, she, in another thing that she said that. So there are many things that you suddenly realize that this is what people think of you. And oftentimes, it's good. It's not always, it's negative. Sometimes it may be, but it depends on how you want to take that without being invalidated. So the blind spots get opened up. So actually, what was earlier not open gets bigger and bigger. And in the process of interaction, there's a lot that even what is unconscious, not available to you, starts opening up because of this increasing size of the window. This any basic, I think one of you on the thing is typing on the thing, please. Ujjwal, is that you?
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, please mute yourself. So that happens. But the typical way I would like you to look at this, there's not much time for me to go through an exercise here, is that the Johari's window process consists of 55 adjectives that Joe and Harry Look, they put together. And these 56 are presented to a group of people. Each person then selects at least about 10 adjectives which apply to them. And each of the others then select 10 adjectives which they think apply to that person, and so on. And totally at least about 20 to 30 of those adjectives are identified. And then we collate. And in the collation, what happens is there's a bunch of adjectives which are common to both what I have selected and what other people have selected about me. There are certain adjectives which I have selected, but other people have not. And there are certain others have selected about me, but I have not selected. And there are some which neither of us has selected. So when you go through this, you have these windows forming. The ones where we both have selected adjectives which match, they are my open window. Everybody knows what I do, etc., what kind of a person I am. These usually describe our behavior pattern. Are we aggressive? Are we quiet? Are we calm? Are we gentle? Are we compassionate? Blah, blah, blah. If you go through this 55, those are there in the list. There is no secret there. You can easily find it out. And then there are those adjectives which I have chosen for myself, who I think I'm cat's whiskers, but others don't think I am, or they don't know I am. So those will be my hidden window. And there's a bunch of adjectives that, those would be the blind window, which I am not aware of. But there are adjectives which I have selected for myself, which other people have not selected, which I'm hiding from them, which is my hidden window. And then I can decide for myself to be able to open myself up in those areas where I'm hiding myself to the extent that I wish to. Maybe there is a certain amount that I do not want to disclose to other people, and but to a larger extent, if I'm able to share, and they give me a feedback, and this process of sharing and feeding back enhances the group openness. It enhances the relationship. It enhances the awareness, interpersonal as well as the intrapersonal relationship. This is something each one of you can do with groups that you are familiar with. It could even be with family groups if you are courageous enough, or with friends and other people, typically people who have known you for some time, who are able to make an opinion about what kind of a person you are. And try this and see. That's at least the beginning of a systemic approach where you are able to establish an awareness between yourself and the people that you are working with. And from there, we can move into the next stages of a larger systems approach. So quickly, before I go to Trace, who's here, and ask him to say a few things about the program that he's going to do in the next couple of days. Suresh and Debi, any insights that you have in whatever so far?
Yeah, Ram, this Debi. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting discussion, and I just related to one of the experiences I had in my C group working. So I'll just take 2 minutes to explain that case. So it's almost like your whatever you said is being assimilated into that case. So here is the management team, C group of one of the large corporations, and there are new people who have been coming, and there are people who are there for many years, 8 years, 10 years, who are part of the company. They feel there is a way that the company runs, and the new people feel there is a different way we should look at. But that doesn't come out so often. It comes out as frictions between one person from the old group and one person from the new group. Okay, and then there is a sense which there is an uneasiness which prevails, and saying that, are we not understanding? Is there something which is not being able to be captured by the group? And that is where the diagnostic takes place. Individual coachings are happening with each of these leaders, but we as a group decide that there is something more to that the eyes can see. And then we put ourselves up in one of the resorts for 3 days and get a very senior guy from outside. And then we realize actually there is a division between the new people wanting to do something and the old people saying that, hey, you guys don't understand. So appreciating each other and understanding each other. So we went through this process, and we did similar to what you're saying in Johari windows, but where we did actually, we said, look, let's speak to each other when we feel extremely connected to the person, okay? And with example, when exactly we feel connected to the person and for why. And that is how we kind of appreciated each other and for their qualities. And then of course we went into giving them feedback. So there is huge amount of, about the self, there is huge amount of openness which is created. And then of course we came out with saying that what are the norms that we would follow. And we had actually to set up a 5 years vision for the company, which we did. But then the individual coachings that subsequently followed were much more meaningful than it used to be earlier before this intervention. So once in the intervention we started out and the directions were clear and people accepted where they need to improve, the individual coachings became much more meaningful. So that's something I just related, and it was very critical for the organization. It was including the CEO and the C group, okay, including COO.
Great.
So amazing experience.
Quick question, Debi. Who was the person who initiated this? Who in the organization initiated it?
Actually, it was, so we represented one of the large companies in the group. It was the group president and I who had a discussion earlier. And we said, what is happening? And then the group president with the chairman initiated.
Okay. So it was really initiated at the higher-most levels, which is really the way it would be most effective. Absolutely. And was there an external facilitator, or you had someone?
Yeah, we got an external facilitator because that was extremely important. Yeah. And the best part was that each members, it was a very close team, 8-9 people, the management team.
Yeah.
But all of them gave their best effort in that
Brilliant.
intervention. Okay,
Yeah.
and including the CEO, who is supposedly the owner.
Okay.
So all of them were equal, and we really confronted. We said that let's confront the elephant. I mean, discover the elephant in the room and confront it.
Okay.
And then we took it that way. Yeah.
Thanks, Debi. Yeah, in the interest of time, Suresh, very briefly, and then I would like to have Trace on, please. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Ram. You know what? In my experience in the past, I have had similar kind of challenges what the earlier speaker spoke. One in specifically, if I have to share, right, there was lack of trust amongst the managers and the CEO, and there was such amount of misalignment, you would want to call it as, or having variety of priorities amongst each one of them, that the common goal was being completely missed. And we actually had to really get a facilitator from outside to get everybody to lock themselves in a particular place so that they could do this. And what happened over there very interestingly was the CEO actually opened up to talk about everything and anything about herself over there, so that everybody knows about her. And everybody, you know what, mostly goes to say that, you know what, I don't know you, so I don't know what it is all about. Once she opened up and then talked about everything in and out, right, in a matter of around 2 days, everybody were able to easily connect to the individual, and magically the goals got aligned. You know what, that's what I wanted to probably bring up over here in the short span of time. The element of trust is very, very key.
Absolutely.
And being open is more important. That's what I want to bring in. Thank you.
Absolutely brilliant, Suresh. I mean, that is really the crux of it, especially at the top level. If the CEO comes up there vulnerably and says, it could be mea culpa, things have gone wrong, I take responsibility for it, and let's start doing something together, and encourage that openness amongst other people. Very often, that's all that is needed. There's no fancy footwork that is needed, and people start doing it themselves. And unfortunately, that doesn't happen. That's a whole problem. Okay, yep. Thanks a lot. Trace now, a bit of your use, as well as maybe you would like to say a little bit about what is that you plan to cover in the 2 days, 16, 17. So if there are people still here, and Magda, you can just, if you have it ready, you can put down the link to Trace's program. That can come up there as well, if you can get that. Thank you.
Yeah, anybody can also reach out to me on LinkedIn. But first of all, I just want to acknowledge the discussion on systemic coaching that I'm listening to. It's vibrant. One of the things that I think that strikes me about what we're talking about is that on a higher level, the old way of working in organizations, in my opinion, is not working anymore. You know, we are literally looking at and listening to working in a new way. And I love some of the things that have been talked about around trust and around safety and around an open heart, because that is a new approach. If we start to look at that, and I would drop a little bit deeper underneath that and go, okay, energetically, for me, working systemically is about working with the energy underneath the problems, challenges, and situations that are going on in the organization. And it's my belief and my experience that the organizations and the teams actually are speaking to us energetically all the time. If we're willing to listen, and if we create safety and we listen together, we can move things much, much more quickly than we have been able to in the old command and control model. And so that's what we're going to be covering in the 2 days, is looking at creating safety systemically, starting with the individual, and then how does that actually flow out into the larger context? And so we'll be looking at exercises to do that and tools to do that. But I think, again, rather than looking at the linear sort of process, which is a temptation for us to go back into that old way of working, you know, looking at it only in the linear. Not that there's anything wrong with that. That's important to do those things, have those steps and processes. But first and foremost, in my opinion, we need to learn how to work with the energy that's underneath the project, that's underneath the organization, and especially that's underneath the toxicity and the problems with a leadership team and a CEO, if that's what's going on there. Because we can't really change anything in the old way by pushing against it or making it work in a different way. We've got to look at working in a way that is much more natural and whole and energetic. And for me, where I come from, I look at the forest and the natural ecosystems of our world, because those things are working energetically already, and we can begin to, listen to the longing underneath organizations to work in the same way. And so in the 2 days, that's what we'll be covering. We'll be looking at how to actually do that, practically speaking. We'll create a safe space to be able to start to listen together to some of the conversations that have no words. And then we'll look at how to harness that so that we can have a bigger impact and shift and change and transform the systems that we work with. And so that's what we'll be covering, Ram.
Okay, I think we had earlier, when you came on this session, we talked about Alan Seal and some of the processes that you had worked on, and we had talked about it earlier. And perhaps not surprisingly, I mentioned to you the other day about Leon Vanderpoel. Leon and Alan both were my mentors when I was doing my coach training, and they know each other. And in fact, there's a book that Leon has recently written, and he sent me the copy of the book called Shift in Being. It's an amazing book on what he calls deep coaching. A lot of it, what you're saying, deep listening, creating deep awareness, and a lot of it about the Alan Seal model. What does the system want to happen?
Yeah, well, so Alan's work is a beautiful example of working with energy, presence, and potential. And the things that can happen when you work that way are amazing. And really, compared to the old way of working, are so much more, efficient and much, much quicker as well. So, one of the things that captured my attention about Otto Scharmer's work and Peter Senge's work with presencing, when I read that book 15 years ago or 12 years ago, was that they were able to change long-standing toxicity and big challenges in organizations. And how did they do that? They did that by presencing. When I first read that, I was working in a very, very top-down command and control petrochemical company, and I chucked that book across the room because I thought, I loved what they were saying, but I had how the heck am I going to be able to apply this in my organization? Well, over the last 12 years, I've learned how to do that. And people like Otto Scharmer and many others, Alan Seal, and obviously the people on this call as well, are moving towards this new way of working. And so, I'm excited to see what's going on all over the world with our organizations changing, because that's what needs to happen.
Thanks, Trace. Thanks a lot. And if any of you who would like to join the 16th, 17th, you can use that link and get back to him. Magda has already posted the password for the session. And thanks a lot, guys. I mean, Suresh, Debi, Venkat, I would like you probably the next month when we have the session, come back and join us on this panel as well. I'd like to go a little deeper. What you said, Suresh, resonated with me a lot. It's not a mystic process. It's not a complex process. It just takes one person with the courage and the vulnerability to come up there and say, hey, this is what needs to happen. I take responsibility. And things start happening. There's no great mystery. There's no great secret there. Unfortunately, since people don't do it themselves, there needs to be an external trigger that makes happen. And maybe the kind of process that you said that happened, we would like to understand a little bit more. And then we'll talk about the model that we use in Coacharya, the speed process, which is very similar, which is built on initial survey and different stages through which we go through for the systemic process. It generally goes through for about 9 to 12 months, and it really makes a huge difference to the organization. And thank you all, guys. Thanks for every one of you joining in here. And those of you next time who would like to join on the panel, who got something to contribute, please drop me a line beforehand so that I can at least sort of invite you onto the panel as soon as we start the session. Once again, have a great day. Those of you who are in India, not much of a day left, but for what it is worth, all the best. See you again soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.